effectively it's like the same thing where it's like it's just incredibly difficult to pull off.
Mhm.
Like, traditional games, you can have just like a little quest system sort of up the top, like, your next mission is X.
Mhm.
Like, you could have that in VR, but it'd just be like stuck to your face and it'd kind of make you feel a little bit off.
I guess
Um,
contextually it could make sense if you set it up where you have some sort of like you're wearing like a visor
oh
in
yeah,
the game.
yeah. Like you can make it work. Um, but especially for like Nightlight, where it was set in the 80s slash 90s
Mhm.
slash 70s, there
Right,
was
right.
kind of a broad range of we don't know where you are, but you're there.
Mhm.
It was just like, how the hell do we make this? Like, how do we tell them that they need to pick up the walkie-talkie and pin it to their chest? Which
Mm.
shouldn't be a complicated thing.
Mhm.
And we had enough people just in testing going like, oh, okay, pick it up, put it like pin it to their chest, and then like the actual game comes out, and we've got people that spend 30 minutes in this room.
That would be me.
It it was just unbelievable to watch, and like the streamers we could kind of forgive because they're like trying to keep, you know, like engage with their audience, so they're not
Yeah, I can
fully
guarantee
listening.
that when you stream, the last thing you're doing is reading and paying
Yeah,
attention to what the game wants you to do.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like we like the main sort of driving force in that game is the voice on said radio.
Mhm, mhm.
So I mean, it was like a walkie-talkie thing. But like we had a guy, he picked it up. He's like, oh, okay, pinned it on his chest, and then he was like, well, I'm not gonna listen to a word this guy says, and it was like the only way we could tell people what we wanted them to do, and we were like, my guy, if he's talking, listen, like we get it, but come on.
Mhm.
It was just one of those like rude awakenings of like, okay, this is gonna be harder than we were anticipating.
Mhm, mhm.
So we ended up just sticking up posters all over the walls, kind of telling you what to do in like a roundabout way.
Mhm.
But even then, people would like just look at it and go, huh, like walk off. It's like, okay, go throw the donut for another 20 minutes and then come back and scream at the fact that the elevator's not working. It's okay. You'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also a thing of like you're fighting like the immersion of the experience. Like obviously VR, like immersion's one of the like really good things about it. Like,
Mhm.
you feel like you're in their world. So like with Nightlight, it was very much the thing of like we don't want text boxes and things kind of appearing. We want it
Right,
to just
right.
be like, no, you want to like we want people to feel like they're in that environment. So it's like, well, we can't have a text box. We can't have like glowing ghost versions of the controllers to show you the controls and
Mhm.
stuff. So like we had to kind of get inventive. So we had like for the controls we had like a whiteboard that had it all like scribbled on, which we actually did do on a whiteboard, and we had to take pictures, and then Matt photoshopped it in.
That that was a fun few afternoons trying to like draw little cartoon hands holding like a controller, and it was like I think one of them took me like an hour just to try and actually get the pose of this little cartoon glove to do what I wanted to do, and then people come into the game and they're like, oh cool, a whiteboard, just draw all over it, and you're like, and they're like, now how do I grab things? It's like, my guy, again, any form
Yeah,
of spatial awareness.
yeah. It is one of the things with Project Nova that like
Mhm.
because we're going more sci-fi. It's like it won't take you out as much if we like pull up a hologram or something
Mm,
like that.
mm.
Like it's just very much so within the genre. So it's like luckily luckily that's like a little bit nicer for us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like yeah, with the tutorial that we did for Nova, it's just like no, we just have glowing controllers to be like press this button to walk
Mhm,
because
mhm.
it's so much nicer, so much easier.
I was just thinking about a really stupid way that you could deal with the not being able to show things. You just have the wind blow and it just slaps them in the face with a piece of paper and it just shows the controls on it.
Even then, they'd look at it and go, "Oh, what's that?" and then chuck it. Like they scrunch it up and just lob it into a bin. Like it would
Yeah.
not even cross their mind. It could be bright red and say, "This is what you need to read,"
Mhm.
and they'd be like, nah."
Yeah, people like to criticize the idea of a lot of AAA games using yellow paint to indicate like where you need to go, what you need to grab. But there's a very good reason why a lot of games do it. Some
Because
games
people
like
are dumb.
overdo it, but there are especially games where they just have. It's especially true where games like have climbing mechanics where you can't climb on everything.
Yeah.
So it's not
Yeah.
clear what is grabbable and what is not. Like, you need some sort of indicator, some sort of consistent indicator that shows you what you need to do. And I don't know the best way you could handle that, because at the end of the day, you're going to have people that choose to not interact with whatever system you provide. And I don't know... There comes a certain point, right, where if someone is not going to interact with the information given to them, and you try to hold their hand as much as possible, you can't solve it for everyone, right? Like,
you inhibit other people's experience by trying to handhold those that really don't want it. It's the balancing act.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely something with our projects that we have to like kind of go back and forth on, like, especially being indie devs. Like, you know, if you're a giant AAA, your game comes out, you have like, well, besides the fact that before your game comes out, you have a lot more money to do QA, so you know you're already in a better spot. Like, you know, we put out a game. I can't remember exactly how many streamers and stuff like that we had play Nightlight, but like, you know, I think it was like 5 to 7
like a
sort of
handful.
thing. So it's like very much a thing of we're like, okay, so they were struggling with this. Is this something we actually need to worry about, or is this just them?
Yeah, is this a streamer problem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much so a pick your battle sort of thing, which is like Avcon was really nice for that in terms of like, you know, we do have, like Matt was saying earlier, like, you know, you have the one guy who's getting motion sick, but most people aren't. So we're like, okay, so in terms of people getting motion sick for the game, that's not going to be a big concern because whatever we're doing is working. And yeah, we can, with like a slightly bigger test audience and things like that, like, you know, we can weed out those problems that are like, okay, no, it's just like 1 or 2 people. Like that can be something we can consider. And you know, later on, if we do more testing, maybe it becomes a valid point and we need to do something about it. But like, you know, we can choose our battles now. We can be like, okay, no one was able to work out how to do this puzzle. That's a problem.
Right.
You know,
Even like at Avcon, we had some of that. Like in terms of using your, you know, multi-tool, like weldy, cutty thingo.
That the official name?
That is on the actual side of the, it's engraved. Like it's it was a thing. It was like anything that's got this symbol on it, you can cut with your tool. Anything that's got this symbol, you need to like weld it back on.
Right.
And people read, okay, so anything that's red, I need to cut, and anything that's blue, I need to weld. But it's a red symbol and a blue symbol. But they just paid attention to red and blue and just discounted everything else.
Right.
So the actual little cutting things were like glowing green, so that they like you'd see them and pay attention. And people were like, okay, I need to look for red things, and just like wandered around the entire room, and we're like, it's right above what you're doing, and the symbol was dead center on that thing, and they're like, so that microchip on the other side of the thing, that's got like a red light on it. Surely that's what I need to be doing. And it's like, no, bud.
Yeah. It is one of those things of like developing, like, I mean, you know, as you were saying, as much as people give developers crap about the whole like putting yellow everywhere to be like climb here, like that is definitely one of the things that we consider as we're going. So like, for us, we very much so came up with the language of like, oh, anything that's green, that is your interaction. So like any doors that the player can go through, any computers the player can interact with, or just like, you know, things like that. We're like, okay, that's got to be green because that means interaction, which is why we did have it that like, oh, okay, when you're cutting, like that's green. So it's like, this is interaction, but it's just one of those things of like, you know, through people playing it, it's like, okay, that's not the associations people are making. People are making like, oh, this thing is glowing red, that's cutting. So it's like one of those things of like, where it's like, okay, well, we'll keep green for like everything else, so that way they know what computer screens they can interact with, what doors they can interact with. But like, yeah, welding and cutting. Okay, now we're changing that to be red and blue.
So you try to create a consistent design language and then not have other things overlap with that, but you don't realize that people are noticing other things that seem like they shouldn't they shouldn't line up with that, but they're not making the same connections that you made. I guess that's sort of the problem with designing puzzles. Like puzzles and other consistent interactable systems are difficult because as you're designing it, and this is a problem with just designing like like desktop software as well, as you're designing it, you have a very deep understanding of what it is that is interactable, what is that is not. Like if you're designing, I don't know, take it out of game development, you're designing like an image editor, you know what each of the buttons do. So it doesn't matter if the icons that are there are just completely random. Yeah. You know what the button number 5 does. Like you've programmed that button. But then someone who hasn't interacted with it before, they have to learn all this stuff from the ground up. And especially if you're doing things that maybe other games haven't done, or you're doing things that other games have done but in a slightly different way, they might have a different idea of what it is that you're trying to get them to do here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, it's one of those things of like, as we're developing, like as you say, like I guess kind of to take it to software where people might be a bit more familiar with, like the whole reason why the save icon is a floppy disk.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah. Everyone always says that.
Yeah.
It's just consistent design language. Like if we're doing something that other people have done, like we look into it and be like, okay, is there a consistent design language here? Like, you know, if we're putting a save button in our game, oh, tons of people have done it. Oh, lots of people use floppy disk. Okay, we're using a floppy disk. Like, it's kind of one of those things of there's a very particular word for it, but it's like symbology and things like that. Like, you know, the associations of symbols and the meanings behind them and stuff like that. Like, we kind of have to be aware of like, okay, if we're doing X, there is this symbol that's associated with it, so we should be using that symbol because, you know, at the very least, it means, you know, if we localize the game and change the language, that symbol should hopefully stay the same. So if you know things bugger up, then people can just go by the symbols. But yeah, it can be fun.